The financial crisis brought global markets to their knees, and once again, the U.S. is at the brink of crisis. A U.S. default on its debt would be the largest threat to this country's financial and economic stability. So says former TARP chief Neel Kashkari. He's now in charge of new investment initiatives at PIMCO, and he joins us now live. Neel, you really see this as an imminent threat if this debt ceiling isn't raised?
Well, I think so. Not just the debt ceiling, but longer term, we need to get control of our massive deficit spending. You know, the Congress in the Dodd-Frank bill created the Financial Stability Oversight Council with the mission of identifying and preventing systemic risks. In my judgment, the biggest systemic risk facing our financial system and our economy is our runaway deficits and our out-of-control spending. And if we were to face a U.S. default, not raising the debt ceiling, not meeting our obligations, it would be catastrophic for our economy and for the global economy. And so I think the Council, the Financial Stability Oversight Council, has an opportunity to weigh into this debate and make the case for why this is a systemic risk and call on Republicans and Democrats to come together to tackle this problem once and for all.
And to do that, because the Financial Stability Oversight Council is overseen by Treasury Secretary Geithner, are you asking for him to either endorse, say, Paul Ryan's plan or endorse the Gang of Six and what they're proposing?
You know, not necessarily. I mean, obviously, the Treasury Secretary is a member of the President's cabinet, and so he needs to support the President and the President's proposals. But I think the Council could come out and just objectively analyze what all the risks are from our deficit spending, what the risks are to the U.S. economy from a default, and call on Congress, Republicans and Democrats to act. I think they can do that without endorsing a specific plan. Remember, most politicians today now see the crisis. They can see the out-of-control deficit spending, but most politicians are fearful for their jobs. They're afraid to take political risk, and so they need cover. And so, to me, the Financial Stability Oversight Council can provide some of that cover by making the case for why this is truly a systemic risk for our economy and for our financial system.
The problem so often is people buy into austerity or buy into some form of cutback, but they don't actually endorse cuts that affect them personally. So what needs to be sold here? I mean, are you arguing that Medicare has to be cut, Medicaid has to be cut, Social Security needs to be on the table?
I think that all of the, quote, political third rails need to be on the table. That's Medicare, Medicaid, it's Social Security, it's defense spending, it's also revenue raisers. You know, I think Chairman Ryan should be applauded for being the first sitting politician to put forward a serious, credible plan and take real political risk by trying to talk about entitlement reforms. And I'm really encouraged that President Obama looks like tomorrow is going to come out and hopefully endorse the work of the Gang of Six. And I think the more Republicans and Democrats we have at the table with specific plans that are really trying to address this budget issue, I think that that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. But on the revenue raising side, as an example, means testing, in my judgment, should be on the table. Look at me, I'm very fortunate. I have a good job. I am not likely to need Social Security or Medicare when I retire. And even though I've been paying into these programs my entire adult life, I think it's reasonable to ask if I should get the full benefits when I retire compared to someone who's less fortunate than I am. And so to me, everything needs to be on the table if we're really going to tackle this issue once and for all.
Adjust the payouts from those entitlement programs based on the level of income. So when you were talking about revenue, do you endorse an increase in taxes? I mean, fellow Republican Saxby Chambliss criticized Ryan's plan for not, raising tax revenue.
Well, one way of doing that, for example, of means testing is a form of tax increases, because if you and I are paying into the program but we don't get the full benefits when we retire, that is a form of raising revenues and bringing that on the table. That's one form that I think should be considered as part of a grand bargain. It's very hard to do this just with spending cuts. It's impossible to do it just with revenue increases. Yeah. Everyone is going to have to give a little bit if we're really going to solve this problem.
Neel, I want to ask you, in trying to sell this idea of immediate action, you're asking Congress to come to consensus and negotiate ideology and principle here. We got to the 11th hour, literally, hours from the expiration of funding in the last budget. This time around, how do you propose getting action going before we get the bond markets clearly panicking before that debt ceiling expiration as we hit that $14 trillion just in May?
Well, that's the real challenge, Margaret. You know, our political system responds to a crisis and is much better at cleaning up a mess than it is at preventing one. And yet we need Republicans and Democrats to come together to make these hard choices before we have an acute fiscal crisis. If we wait until we have an acute fiscal crisis and confidence in treasuries is lost, we may never get it back again. The dollar will be harmed. Confidence in the U.S. economy will be harmed. And so we need our economic leaders, such as the Financial Stability Oversight Council, to come out and make the case for what's at stake, why we need to take action today while we still have the confidence of global investors. Really what's at stake is our future, the future generations of America. You know, we've enjoyed the reserve currency for decades. If we want to continue to enjoy a strong Treasury market, a strong dollar, we need to make these changes now.
When you were at the Treasury, though, in the worst of the crisis, Wall Street thought it was inevitable that Congress is going to have to get behind that bailout plan that you helped put together, the $700 billion plan. They refused it at first, and then the markets just panicked. It was that panic that forced political action. This time around, do you think that there's understanding in Washington of what would happen in the bond markets if they don't raise that debt ceiling?
You know, I think at a very high level, there's some understanding of what's at stake. People intuitively get it. The dollar's really important. Treasuries are really important. But I'm not sure that people understand it fully. And so the more people we can come out and speak about what's at stake, the better. And that's why I'm encouraged by what Chairman Ryan has done. I'm encouraged that President Obama is going to give a speech tomorrow and hopefully put forward his own deficit reduction plans. The more people, the more leaders of both parties we have at the table putting forward serious proposals, the more likely we are to be successful in getting this done. You know, our economic future is what's at stake, and so we need to take this very seriously.
Quickly before I let you go, in Europe, George Soros was warning that not allowing some of the states to restructure their debts is creating moral hazard once again. Do you expect, and should we see Portugal restructure its debt?
Yes. I mean, Greece, Ireland, Portugal simply have too much debt, more debt that their economies can afford, and it's likely they'll need to restructure or default. The question is, how do you do that in an orderly manner without causing contagion to Spain and other countries and causing chaos? So right now, we've seen Band-Aids and bridge loans. We need to see a resolution, and that likely means restructuring.
All right, Neel, always great to talk to you. Take care.